So we're looking at Rishi's budget. Something that Rishi's done very well is one of the few politicians that's known by his first name. We asked some people the other day if they knew what Rishi's surname was, and not many people knew. So nearly a la Boris. So he seems to be doing a little bit of PR. We actually saw him the other day. There were two things we saw the other day. One was Rishi, how small he was, and also how short, Professor Van Tam is. If you watch Professor Van Tam on the briefs, he's actually stood on a box. So small men are taking over. That's good to see. So we're looking at business in a post-COVID world. So we have a few bits of projections here. Rishi and the politicians and advisors given us plenty of clues how they see it's going. We're trying to bring our angle that says this is our perspective. And I think we've got the backdrop there, not that we know anything by any stretch, but we deal in primarily SME debt. And at the moment, we're getting about 5 inquiries a day, which is pretty scary in terms of where the economy is going. And it also gives an indication that it's going to get worse because obviously we're still subject to the provisions and or protections of Coronavirus Act 2020 and all the other things that Rishi's brought to the party. This isn't a UK phenomenon in terms of furlough and all protection. It's all going on around the world. So the world's fairly racking up some debt here, but we're going to come to that a bit later, specifically how it affects us. So we're going to kick off now. We're going to go through a couple of slides here in a minute. I usually slice, this isn't as a PowerPoint this is an aid memoir for me. So if you'll work with me and hopefully it gives a bit more context of what we're going to put across here. That's our little book, which is quite a pleasing little thing that's being well received. Quite a few downloads coming from it. You're very welcome to it. If you want a hard copy, just contact us. There'll be some contact details at the end. It's written in a slightly, I wouldn't say a funny way, but it's not serious, technical, but it gives a bit more context as we see it as the world will pan out here, particularly with the UK and Ireland and the SME scenarios that are going to unravel as we go along here. So we'll get going. Here's something I was listening to the other day, a brilliant podcast, something I'm finding myself listening more and more to get the true perspective of things, because I've been going on a little bit about LinkedIn and other forms of social media where I think mainstream media is a disgrace. We know good news doesn't sell, bad news does, but hey guys, let's change the record here. But there's some brilliant podcasts. This guy was on one by Reid Hoffman, the man that the co-founder of LinkedIn, and John Donahoe. We're actually going to read it out because it's very strong and poignant. I think we've all got to adapt to this in some way going forward, especially some of the industries that we're going to talk about. And John was very erudite in terms of how he's having to change Nike around. He was talking around the fact that, for instance, in China alone, they had 6,000 stores that all had to close, and then they had to service and manage instead directly their 100 million customers that they have in China. So John said, don't assume it's going to go back to the way it was. That's death. Some change feels exciting, some feels challenged. It ain't over till it's over. Everything apart from that last bit. It's not going to be the same going forward. We nearly all know that. We're going to customer psyches are going to change. We won't be having those Saturday nights when we're 3 deep at the bar, leaning across, trying to buy a pint and all that sort of carrying on anymore. There's a massive changes coming in, but there's some very good ones as well. We're already seeing. But if you're old school, old style, not willing to change your ways and just think you can open your doors and everything will be great, that's death, as John says there. So here's the subjects and how we're going to run through this quick webinar today. So we're going to look at Rishi's budget for business. It wasn't overly extensive. What he had to do because of the provisions and everything else that he's got to cover with the COVID-19 scenario and or recession, he's had to split the technical tax stuff, for want of a better word, through to the 23rd of March. So that's when we're going to get the fancier stuff that's going to come through, which accountants will love. That's cool. Obviously, he brought a few of the headline things in, such as the corporation tax and the continuation of the furlough and every other provision that he's done to stretch out the recession, if you like. Big worry to our mind is the unemployment level, which they're talking about 7%, which is roughly twice what it was prior to the COVID pandemic starting. I had a little bit of a rant about training schemes because I don't think the government and all the bodies that basically run those are fit for purpose. Love a fancy name. Then Rishi does have the challenge of how he's going to wean us off the support, and that's going to be tough enough. We're going to do a little bit of reality of context because, again, back to helping form our own opinions, which we work quite hard on. Somebody last night, quite rightly on Twitter, Jack O'Kane said, please, I won't use the actual language, but basically it was saying a voice pop with an 80-year-old man who doesn't know what day it is isn't the news. So we've got to start to work harder as people and individuals, especially in business, to create our own opinions. Let's not rely on the mainstream media. Then we talk about the K-shaped recession, which is there are all sorts of types of recession everybody's talking about. And we're also commenting that the recession we think will start coming to an end, most likely in 4 years, and quite cynically, that strangely enough happens around and about the next election. A little bit of macro that's out there, and again, getting those into the context. We had Mike Ashley this morning moaning because the rates bill provisions only covered properties £2 million, poor love, whereas the guy in the corner shop maybe struggling to meet his 10, 15 grand bill. We have had a couple of questions in, there's a couple of things that are hanging over. So that's the form of what we're going to do here. And to say, Rishi stood up the other day, 12:30 on Wednesday, released obviously and leaked most of the stuff before, which seems to be the norm this day. And we knew what was coming. So the key one, as he sees it at the moment, and quite rightly so in terms of where the economy is that the COVID-19 provisions are going to be extended. It was a bit loose on some of them, are going to be extended to June/September. By that, we see furlough running to the end of June and then petering away in terms of percentage if it's still required by some companies. By June, according to the roadmap, we should be free and out, subject to the COVID vaccine take-up. Personal note, mine's tomorrow. And there are other things that are going on in there. He's got his extension of the VAT for hospitality still at 5%. That's going to take some weaning off. We're talking about the Coronavirus Act. That is due to finish at the provisions therein and the protections typically for tenants against landlords. That's due to end or be released, as it were, at the end of March. We'll see, and a couple of other points in there. And as I said, he's got a more technical tax day on the 23rd of March, which undoubtedly there are hundreds of civil servants pouring over as we speak. The headline point was the corporation tax set at 25%, running from 2023. So as I had a little dig at these Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago, they're very sensational in their news delivery nowadays. Oliver Shah, who I fall out with, he said there was a company that had £1 billion of turnover and only paid £30 million of tax. And as I said to him, last time I looked, corporation tax was only payable on profits. It'd be good if we reported on that basis. So that is a monumental leap. I think it's going up by about a third. It's 90% currently. But the key points out of there is it only applies if you make more than 250,000. And from that point, it will be 25%. And as I point down there, if you're making £1 million of profit, you've got another £60,000 potentially to pay on your corporation tax bill. Now, I'm no communist by any stretch, but we're feeling levels of responsibility in terms of what we have to do going forward. None of us would have experienced a pandemic. We're going to come back in a minute. There are a number of references to war footings, war standings, worst crisis in peacetime, etc., etc. And at those points of crisis, if you like, we will have to step up. Socially, overall, we've got to do our right thing. And if we have to pay more tax to protect the whole business community, that's what we've got to look at. So if we've got our travel industry on its backside, we've got the high street, which we've got over there on its backside. I walked down the high street, I haven't been here for about 10 days in Harrogate, and I noticed 4 shops, four shops up for rent that had literally just closed, boarded up, and Harrogate's quite a decent retail spot, but if that's happening here, then it's going to be happening literally across the UK and Ireland, so that's not good. So we have a responsibility to top up the coffers to make sure those that are in power that can use it in the right way, hopefully. So Already we're getting the bleating. There are a couple of hedge funds this morning talking about if we put it up to that rate, they're going to be leaving our shores, looking for better tax havens, da-di-da-di-da. See ya, go, get out. We don't need you, right? This is a stage where it's a case of everybody buckling down. I'm a big advocate of everybody enjoying themselves. And when we do get the chance, I think it's our civic duty to support the industries that we created in towns and cities here, the cafe society, the bar society, the restaurant society. We've got to get back out and do the right thing and enjoy ourselves, which is very important. But we don't need bleaters going, oh, your rate's a bit high, we don't think we should pay that. Cool, go away. That's very good. Very important, though, we keep the government to task and make sure that they do spend that money correctly. A concern, because I don't think we're strong enough mentally to deal with this, will be the next wave of redundancies and everything else that's going to come out of unemployment. Now, the ONS were quoting back, I think it was only about 4 or 5 months ago, that they thought that this would be in the region of 12%, which would have been catastrophic. 7% or 6.9% reflects a doubling of the rate back against this time last year, just before lockdown 1 started. Now, it's our younger people primarily that I think are going to be at risk here. They're the most, I think I use the phrase, disposable employees. Sorry, I'm not keeping up with my own slides. Disposable employees. That is not my opinion, that's the description. Disposable is in the sense that it's almost like that ability to get rid of people, if you like, on a last in, first out basis. And businesses have to be more malleable, and employees, are the ones that are the most transient asset that they have in a business. For instance, if you say when it all settles down, we go back and pubs and restaurants can only run at, say, 70% of the previous level that they used to trade at. Obviously, their model has to change. That's why I said we've got to have that malleable model. I'm pretty sure we've got any number of publicans, restaurateurs, coffee shops, etc., struggling like crazy with the landlords. And if you've got personal guarantees and you've got the leases in your own names or other people guaranteed, it's very difficult. We have to create a malleable business model because we don't know where this is going to pitch. At the end of all this, back to our friends at the ONS, they envisage by 2026 the economy will have shrunk, or will have recovered, but will still be 3% below what it was at the end of 2019. So, there's a lot here that's going on, and we've got to be very careful. Again, back to our great friends at mainstream media, all they're doing is telling us we're weak, young people, you're weak, young people, you have mental health problems, and we've got to be very careful we keep the lid on this because this could get out of control completely. And it really, excuse my French, pisses me off when you get doctors and medical people talking about this, but offering no result to it or how we're going to overcome it. So the other side of it is, if we're in business here, there are brilliant opportunities because there's going to be brilliant people around. There are a lot of very creative people that are stuck because unemployment's really low levels. They're taking, if you like, lesser jobs. I don't decry anybody what anybody does, but if you're a barman and you've actually got creative skills, if you're a barista and you've got great creative skills, those guys need to be grabbed and girls need to be grabbed, give them opportunities. We're applying this in a business we have in Spain, where we're trying to find introducers to give us business because we know estate agents out there are absolutely hamstrung. They're doing nothing. So we're trying to work on finding good people. They need the motivation to do it. But again, this is the opportunity for SMEs where we're paying full dollar, but we've got to find the people that are motivated enough. We've got to get them out. And we've got Rishi again. I don't like governments running, and they've never performed when it comes to training schemes. Never, ever, ever. But they come up with their fancy names. Here's the ones in current thing. And every time it's happened, I'm of a certain age, so I've seen a few recessions. I've seen after the miners' strike, I've seen any number of recessions. The financial crash, obviously, which is where our business mainly grew out of. But coming up just with, I think they spend more time doing fancy dandy names, changing their logos of the job centre or whatever it's called this week. So the current ones are Help to Grow, flexi job apprenticeships, skills boot camps, and they're going to give SME training, management training. Okay, so first off, I count myself as an SME owner. I do not want a civil servant coming around and giving me training as to how I should manage my business. With respect, in the main, most of those people are only fit to order paper clips, and it becomes very much jobs for the boys. So the money filters down into systems, filters out into the various bodies and the quangos and everything else. Then you get the experts in, and then you get grants and fees and everything flying around, and it becomes just, again, jobs for the boys. This needs gripping properly. Going back to what I was saying previously, the unemployment is going to hit our younger people undoubtedly. It's going to hit our undertrained older people, and it's very important we get the training right and don't start creating crap courses such as, I don't know, surf management or media studies or anything like that. We are a brilliant tech nation. We have to develop that side of things. It needs to be grabbed. But I don't think we're going to be up for it. I don't think we are. I think we're reverted type, a couple of stats, a couple of photo ops, and they all do it. I don't care what side of the political divide you are, or anywhere in the world, they'll do the same thing. So a little bit of a rant of mine, but I think it's very, very important we look after our young people here and give them the right support, not this mumbo jumbo crap that we usually come out with. This is the other challenge we face. So we've had the benefit of Rishi's plans, and again, they've been applied across the world. The states have done it. I know there's a guy I know in Switzerland. Their system out there has been incredible, and we're basically gathering up a bill to all intents and purposes, and it's the same structure across the world, across the Baltic states, across Europe to a fair degree. To a degree, we're pretty advanced in terms of what we do. I know we hear all the noise about how we're failing, how we're da-da-da-da-da. We're not bad as a country, we're not done bad. Again, that's not a political statement. We've got furlough, which if that wasn't, I don't know what the word was before, but now thank God it's there, because the economy, the world's economy would have dropped off the side. There would have been huge civil unrest because you would have had millions of people suddenly with no income and no job, which couldn't be, obviously. So that's held up there. One of the key ones in terms of what we're involved in is the Coronavirus Act of 2020, which has given businesses the protection from essentially litigation. The main area it seems to have been applied in is landlords and tenants, but that I think is just storing up trouble further down the track. But all of this support, is in place to make sure we can get the best chance through from this recession and extend the recession. So rather than there's a V shape, there's all sorts of shapes we'll go through in a minute. I'll tell you a little anecdote in a minute where I offended somebody at the Bank of England. And V-shaped, swoosh, we go for the K-shaped, but the Coronavirus Act is given that chance just to give it a gentle downglide for it to come back, strange enough, in 4 years. I was speaking, very fortunate to speak to David Tate, who's the CEO of the Gold Council, and I was berating Andy Haldane, who is what I think is the Deputy Governor of the Bank of England now. And Andy Haldane keeps coming up with crazy things, and one of his was it was going to be a V-shaped recovery. Okay, bang, literally bounced straight back up. And I said to Mr. Tate, David Tate, one day that I thought Andy Haldane may have been on hallucinogenic substances. At which point David Tate said, yes, I think the same. And I said that to him the other day when I was in the Precious Metals Committee meeting, and he's a very nice guy, So it was, but it's just smoothing it out. The tax deferment has been there. We've been able to, if we needed to, we've been able to take the year to pay our bills. That's coming to an end. Business rates seems to be, that's got to come back in because there's little or no money going to local government, and the 5% hospitality VAT rate. All of those are coming to a close either in the next 3 to 6 months. And the challenge is for Rishi and the Treasurer and everybody else is to not for them all to stop on the same date. And I think that's slightly where we're getting to. They're able to use that date of the 21st of June when Boris says we can all go out to play, but it's going to be dog eat dog. And the Coronavirus Act has built up huge demand for litigation. A couple of our friends are watching, I know, are in the debt industry, on the legal side, and for insolvency practitioners. And there is masses of pent up demand for this work, and the courts will be, if they're not already, they will be completely rammed, and it's that's going to be very ugly. The phrase we're using at the moment is feral. It's going to be pretty feral out there. So see how we do, see how those pan out. We've been looking at, we do quite a bit of this contemplative stuff because we're trying to work out what is going on. We're listening to loads. We're not taking his opinion, her opinion, their opinion, whatever it is. We're trying to build up our own thing. And when you've got the vox pops on the news and then the old man in the street telling you who's going to pay for this, you know, you just don't get it, guys. You can't put news across there. And so what we've done, we did a little bit of research. I'm sure most people know this, but just take it. It's quite clever the way it's being used in terms of the talk, if you like, when you get the briefs, the medical briefs as well, and also the finance briefs. So just so we get a couple of numbers out there, the national debt at the end of 2019, just prior to COVID, that the UK government owed was 1.9 trillion, or for effect, as they say in the BBC, 1,900 billion pounds. So that was our debt that we were carrying at that point, all it down the track, bonds and everything else. Right? I don't know if you've noticed, but they're starting to use World War II references. This is the worst crisis in peacetime. This is the worst hit on the economy since World War II. This is the biggest percentage of debt to GDPR since World War II, et cetera, et cetera. Now, World War II cost us, if not taking out the lives thing, but in monetary terms, cost 21 billion. So that was a 6-year period when we're at war. And we finished paying off the last bonds on that in 2006. So that is 55, 60 odd year life scale. It would appear that COVID-19 is going to cost us 500 billion. Now, the Vox box that we're getting on the news, it's how are we going to pay for this? How are we going to pay? Cool, it's got to be paid for, but it ain't going to be, with respect, it ain't going to be my problem. This is going to be way down the track. I'm not saying it's not my problem, but that's when it's going to go. It's not, we've got to write a check out in a couple of years' time. The bonds that are being written now are incredible in that the interest rates are so low. We're managing to lock in next to nothing. Obviously, that can't go on forever because at some point, as happened in the last recession, if we push it too far, somebody will trigger something and it'll go wrong. As is, the world's staying fairly close onto this. Obviously, whatever happens in America eventually happens here, and they're writing trillions and trillions of dollars of debt. But it's for down the track. So the challenge for Rishi at the moment is to make sure we keep the economy looking okay, make sure it gets the support it's going, get those tax flows going, because then that helps us hold on to our credit status to make sure these bonds we do write from my angle for the next generation are at the right rate. If we go back to the last recession and you saw what happened with the Italian rates and the Greek rates, because no one had, they were nearly default rates, but for the ECB, they would have massively defaulted. So that's the game that Rishi has to play there. Now, I told my marketing team that we were looking for a K-shaped recession graph, and either we call them educationally challenged, if that's a K, but you get the example. What is going to happen here, I think, is going to be a split recession. I'm not sure about the industry there, retail. If that was retail across the board, that's okay. If you take online supermarkets and everything, but if you look at the high street, that's very different. But this fits the thing. So basically, those that are doing okay now will actually do better as we come back out of the recession, whatever form that takes. Those that were doing okay but are in those headline things of travel, entertainment, hospitality, food service, and I'll put the high street in there as well, they're going to struggle like crazy. So in turn, this is where I think it's very important that we keep sight of the effect on our younger people, because as we know, a lot of our young people work in those industries that we think are going to need assistance there. So it's a K-shaped, there's all sorts of theories. So my friend Andy Haldane's V-shaped. There was the talk of the Nike swoosh. There's any K-shaped where it's at, and we're going to go through a couple of points of why we see that. And what we're not trying to be, and we're not, by any stretch over technical. It's trying to bring a bit of practicality and how it sits in with what the Treasury is trying to do here. And I don't, again, not a political statement. So I will put out again, it's a K-shaped recession. I think there's a 4-year plan, which is politically led, to get to the next election to show, look how well we did. I mean, they've made a whole, as every government has, by the way, around the world in terms of dealing with COVID-19. Give them a bit of a break. There wasn't a manual that says, please break out in event of COVID-19. Anyway, coming to vaccinations going very well. The rest of the world needs to make sure we get sorted on that side as well. But from the UK and Irish perspective, the next 4 years are going to be very important. And that in turn in the UK equals the next election. But that's for the games they play. Going back to the types of businesses before, that in turn is going to affect the types of employees. And again, it's our young people. This isn't a moral thing that I'm coming on with this and saying we must look after our young people. It's going to happen if we don't do the right thing. And it is the right thing we have to do. Things like COVID-19 are life-changing. If you're affected and you've had family, and heaven forbid you've lost somebody you love, that's terrible, full stop. But going forward, what it is, it's the effect it has on us as society and also us as individuals. We'll all change massively from it. But but again, going back, it's the types of business, our K graph, and it's that type of employees. Those are the guys that are going to suffer. We've got to look after. And QE, quantitative easing, after the last recession, helped those that were doing well. The rich got richer. Again, not a political statement. Money poured into the system. It poured into the hedge fund, or it didn't really make its way down into the general economy, or it did, but very, very slowly. And we know the effect of, so if you've got a successful business, you come out of good times. And I do commend to you that podcast, your man John Donahoe's there, that's Masters of Scale, by the way, and it's very, very good. And he was saying they're going to bounce straight back. It's done things for their business that has shown their online business has gone up by, I think it was 30%, he said, and they didn't expect that to happen for about 5 years. And that's happened in less than a year because it had to. So the success breeding success, that should be breeding success, by the way, is an old adage, but it's so true. The risk industries are going to struggle. If you're old school and just think that's going to open like that, the model has to change. The model has to change. Old school businesses doing the same thing, as our man said back there, that's death. But finishing on that very cynical point, strange enough, the economy will come around about the time of the next election. But that's the way it works. This isn't going to be too technical. This is my perception of how things are going. I try and keep abreast of what's going on, only because I'm a nosy bugger, but I like to keep myself sharp in that sense. And I repeat again, let's not rely on mainstream media. Let's not, please. Harry and Meghan are not the news for whatever they think. Okay, that isn't. It's not all bad news. They don't like good news. I get that, right? But the vaccination process is fantastic the way it's going. And well done, everybody that's in that. So that is a micro thing. We need to keep doing that. Old style industries are going okay, possibly. I'm amazed by when you see shops closing on one hand, and then in Belfast and in Harrogate here, the two places I'm in between, it's amazing to see things like craft bakers. There was a queue in Omar Road the other day in Belfast, and there must have been 30 people queuing up for a craft baker. I don't mind bread, but I won't queue up for 30, won't be the number 30 in the queue for bread. But it's going to be very strange the way things change there. So on that micro sense, it's looking for those opportunities. Everything's promoted now online, and most retail, any element, we're all guilty. I'm particularly guilty of using Amazon. It's incredible what they're doing, but even that's working on the micro level and the small businesses there. There was a brilliant article the other day in a paper I read by Shopify, a crazy, I think he's Norwegian, based in Canada now, but what they're doing for retail is incredible. Also, obviously, all online. But as our friend, and I'm going to repeat it because it's such a poignant phrase, our friend at Nike said, John Donahoe there, don't assume it's going to go back to the way it was. It definitely isn't. It cannot. It's going to take a while to do it. And there's not I don't think there'll be the time or the backdrop to be able to wait for it to come back. You've got to do something different. You've got to, like it says, that change can be exciting and it will be challenging. But if you don't do it, it's death. Change is essential. We changed. We did a marketing plan at Christmas, and I was very proud of it, and 16, 17 pages of wonderful things. And we had to rip the bloody thing up by about the third week when we went back into lockdown. And it's forever it will be going forward. If you are a professional services firm, if you do not develop what you're doing going forward, if you just think we've got a lovely brass plaque outside our office, we open our doors and the business floods in, you're toast. You're toast. A couple of bits on the macro side, okay, and you're already getting the bleating. Those guys are okay and pretty safe, yet they have other agendas here. But the corporation tax, if that is the basis of people work out on their country, the country that they should trade in, or the country they should incorporate their country in, I don't think you want them. You don't want them in your country. We don't want the hedge fund sat in there eating bloody Kobe beef in bloody Mayfair. If you don't want it, go. That side's there. Mike actually, like I said this morning, was bleating about rates bills being so high. Tim Martin bleating about this and all that sort of stuff. Then that's, we've got the micro side. That's what we deal in. That is the bedrock, which I think Rishi gets, and the Treasury. SMEs, easy for me to say, and micro business are the backbone of this economy. It is not the civil service. If I offend anybody in the civil service, I'm sorry, but you take the money. SMEs, micro businesses, make the money. They create, they're the engine, they're the fuel that get the whole bloody economy going. And we've got to look after them. And then you've got the backdrop where you've got some industries that are just almost too big to fail in the macro side. They've got to be looked after. Rolls-Royce has gone hugely into aviation. And obviously there's not too much demand for new planes at the moment, and nor will there be. So those are just a couple of points on the macro. We weren't going to go into too deep in it because it's not really for us to decide. We just got to see what we can affect, and we in Bell and Company can help people if they're in the brown and smelly, as we call it. So that's our very short webinar. There isn't too much technically in there from Rishi because he didn't say a great deal about business. He's given the support in terms of how we're going to go forward here and extending it out and extending the recession, like I keep saying, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we've had to say. Then we've had a couple of questions in which we'll quickly run through. And again, these are our opinions. We're starting to come back. So we've got 3 questions here on the payback of civils and bibbles. A couple of them that we weren't qualified to answer. And we sent them off to see somebody else. There was one, for instance, they had a civils loan that had a three-year payment program, and they wanted to know, Rishi was talking about they can be paid over 10 years now. So we put them in touch with a decent finance broker there, and they're sorting that out for them. The paybacks and civils and bibbles, there's going to be massive defaults here, huge defaults. There was an article in the Financial Times, a survey, and they were talking the main outcome of that survey was that 42% of the people that took bibbles didn't expect to pay it back, didn't think they were struggling, didn't think they may have to look for more help, didn't expect to pay it back. To all intents and purposes, bibbles were treated like big car loans. That's a huge, huge swathe of trouble coming down the track. But I think it was another agenda. So when Rishi and the Treasury get dragged into a committee meeting in the Houses of Commons in 3 years' time, you heard it here first, this money was more or less throwaway money to make sure businesses could limp through, hopefully, the pandemic recession. Same with civils, but obviously the numbers are a bit bigger, but it's going to be heady times. Quite a few people, and we're pretty well versed on this, banks' reaction to this. Now, the banks been talking of how they're going to deal with the undoubted flood of defaults here. And at one point, they were looking at, in the UK anyway, at creating one debt collection agency because they just expected a lot of grief here. And banks have to follow the rules. It's similar to the enterprise loan schemes and things like that. And they can't just go, okay, we tried to get the money off that company. They can't pay it and hold their hand out and get 80% back from the government. There's going to be all sorts of legal structures where, and they may hear, it depends how far they have got to go. If they've got to start liquidating companies to trigger the ability to go and ask the government for the recompense, where the government said they'd guarantee this, there's going to be, excuse my parlance, a shitstorm coming down on that. Banks, especially the big four in the UK, not traditionally brilliant at recovery. I think they thought once they got over the last recession and went through all the pain of that, that would be the last time they would have to deal with the ugly side of business. And our experiences of them at the minute is that prior to COVID, they weren't great at it. You've also got the heady mix in there. It's new banks, and I'll just extend the question out. We're starting to see peer-to-peer funds coming under pressure, and because they're not getting the payments in, and they've given holidays, they've tried, whether they should have done, is another thing, they've tried to get some of their loans over to Bibbles and Sibbles so they get better covenants, if you like, the government being the ultimate covenant. So that's going to be, we'll have to watch that space, but going to be fairly ugly. The Coronavirus Act, which was Rishi's plan to make sure the landlords essentially left the tenants where they were going to be. So somebody said to us the other day, when will the landlord come for you? Each case is very different in these scenarios, but this will be. He's extended it again to the end of March. I don't think, it may be wrong, somebody could correct me. He hasn't come back and said we're extending it beyond there. Now, the flip side of this, you have got landlords, you have got pension funds, etc., that hold commercial property and they're not getting anything in. So there's a balancing act here that has to be addressed at some point. That said, there needs to be some malleability in the system, because the old style leases are the ones that are going to make our high streets deserts. And they're talking about all the rubbish about let's turn it into residential. Yeah, because planning committees and civil servants act quite quickly and bring those things in, don't they? I think he's going to. I've got a feeling he's still going to hang on to this 31st of March date and say, right, okay, that's the end of that provision. We're already seeing some landlords move on people, not necessarily in terms of looking for evictions, but looking at the security they have, which may take the form of personal guarantees. And that's the sort of stuff people are starting to, because they know there's going to be a fair queue in terms of the legal processes in the courts. And we see people starting to jump in, if you like, push in to make sure they've got their spot in the queue. So they start their legal letters, start their litigation, everything else that's involved here. Their stat demands and everything else. Start putting it out there, so eventually it will pop out, hopefully, in the court process, in their eyes, quicker than would be if they waited right until Rishi said, right, everybody kill one another. Because unfortunately, that on that side of things, that day is coming. So that's us. A bit of a rattle through. It was a little bit opinionated, which I'm not going to apologise for. We deal with businesses every day in trouble, so we don't know everything. Never purport that, but we try and keep ourselves ahead of the curve. And basically, this was trying to share a couple of things there. So that's us. If you want anything direct with any specifics, you want to send me a rude email, sometimes talking out the back of my head or worse, that's cool. There's my email address. There's our number. If anybody is in diffs, give us a shout. It's not an advert, this. And I say anything, any inquiries that come from this to start with, if they want to have a chat about anything, we're here and willing to have a chat away. So anyway, look after yourselves, get that jab soon, and off we go. Good luck. Bye.